Hey, welcome to the Flipped Classroom lessons, and this is implementation in a third grade classroom. And the implementation overview, as part of our narrative unit, students wrote stories about the effect that COVID-19 has had in their lives and published them in a classroom magazine. You should know that this is the first piece of writing they published this year. In third grade, as part of our dual immersion program, students first learn about narrative writing in a writing workshop model in Spanish only. And later in the year, students will revisit this type of writing in English. For this activity, it was mainly done in Spanish, but some students chose to translate their Spanish writing to make it accessible to all of our English-speaking families. So let's take a look at the project and what we did. The demographic information, this is a third grade classroom. The subject is Spanish language arts. Number of students is 24. Socioeconomic status, we have low to mid-high, 75% of students are on free or reduced lunch. And the academic level summary is that 75% of students are making adequate progress in writing, while 25% are either tier 2 or tier 3 in Spanish writing. Our lesson objectives is that students will write narrative stories about life during the pandemic. And this is anchored on the writing narratives standards for the third grade. The composite of a struggling student. Well, student has temporarily moved to a crowded home during the pandemic to support family members. Parents are busy working from home as well. Academically, the student is having trouble staying focused and finishing work, and in addition, their internet signal is unreliable. The computer they borrowed from school is faulty, and the student gets dropped from Zoom meetings multiple times during the day. In the struggling classroom, in a writing workshop classroom, students need to be able to interact and discuss their ideas with each other throughout the writing process. This practice is even more important in a virtual classroom because there are limited opportunities for students to collaborate. However, some students have made it a habit of turning off their sound and cameras appearing absent. It is obvious that they need support and they do not know where to begin, but other students are so engaged that airtime is not balanced. Some of the prerequisite skills that are required for mastery include understanding story structure, understanding points of view, understanding characters and character traits, the use of dialogue, what are temporal words and when they are used, how does problem and solution play a role in stories, how to write complete sentences, how to use a variety of sentences, capitalization at the beginning of sentences and improper nouns, appropriate punctuation, periods, commas in a series, exclamation, and interrogative marks, and how to write for different audiences. So the lessons, where does my lesson fall? Actually, my lesson fall towards the end of this sequence. So we started with elements of narrative writing, and we looked at mentor text. So we use mainly KidBiz articles, which are articles that are written in newspaper format, and they are current events. So we started with looking at those mentor texts, and we use those throughout the unit the mini unit for inspiration. So we started looking at those and learning about what was the narrative text. Then we looked into brainstorming using a flow map and writing a narrative story. And we talked about different hooks. So this one was asking a question, problem and solution, then and now. We also talked about the different types of sentences, another hook, 2 points of view, and then give a little information and then tell your story. And then at last, we also presented students with other more creative hooks that they could add to their writing. And we wrote 2 more pieces of writing that were not based on mentor text, but this was more on the students' personal experience, which was a fun experience and a terrible experience that had to do with COVID-19. Then by day 10, they chose their writing for publishing. And we also talked about starting to edit it by adding more descriptive details and adding transitional words. And then we actually went into the flipped lesson. And the flipped lesson had to do with editing and preparing for publishing. This they did at home. They watched a video, the instructions that were given to them with a video. And so they pasted their before editing writing here. They watched the video, which instructed them to check for their ideas, to check for their sentence formation, check for punctuation, capitalization, and then spelling. And lastly, they did their final version on page 4. And so they came to school with their story already edited, and then we took their story and we published it into a magazine template. So one of the things that I like to do is add the tasks at the beginning of any assignment so that students are clear on what they have to do. And what they had to do is look at the different templates. They were given 3 templates plus a blank one to choose from. So they got to choose whichever format they wanted to select, and they pasted the writing on it, and they formatted it to the way they wanted it. So at the end, this was their final product. Now, I will talk about recommendations and findings in a second, but this is what they came up with as their final product. So some of the things that I learned by doing this, some of my key findings, as we explore mentor articles, we noticed that writing structures do not follow a clear narrative format. While this was a great activity at the beginning of the unit, more work is needed in learning the story structure, the traditional story structure, and the character development. Another finding was that the internet connection and accessibility is very unpredictable for some students, and the tasks that were assigned a day before they were due, some students might have trouble actually completing those because of the internet unreliability. So if the assignments are assigned a few days ahead of time, that might help in students completing their work on time. And the last finding is that students need a variety of experiences in class, in addition to modeling, on how to interact with the material and how to manipulate Google Slides on their own prior to being expected to do it at home independently. And some of the recommendations that I have is that modeling in class is key to success. If students do not know how to deal with the technology, then they're going to have a really hard time completing this assignment. Choosing a topic for the magazine and writing multiple entries was helpful because it allowed us to explore different ideas on the topic and a variety of text structures. It also allowed for a variety of entries in the magazine and not just one type of writing. And lastly, having individual assigned templates for students to choose from when formatting the magazine page was helpful. Also, it is recommended that one person, the teacher or the instructional assistant, collects all the published pages into one final document and therefore publishing the magazine. Some of the accommodations that I had to do for my students that were struggling was I had to meet with them separately, provide sentence frames for them, and provide a lot of guidance on how to brainstorm their ideas and how to put them together into the writing. I also had a small group of students that looked at each other's work and gave each other suggestions. And then lastly, I did a conference with some students over the phone because their internet was not working and we couldn't do Zoom, but we can meet with the phone to figure it out some of the pieces that they needed to do for the editing. So that's it. That's my project. I hope you liked it, and I hope it's useful for some of you.